Let's take a look at another double replacement reaction. I have calcium acetate plus potassium sulfate. They're going to react, and the possible products here are going to be calcium with sulfate and potassium with acetate. So calcium forms a 2 plus ion, sulfate is a 2 minus ion, so that's pretty easy. It's going to make calcium sulfate, 1-to-1 ratio. And then potassium and acetate are both 1 charges. Potassium's 1 plus, acetate's 1 minus. And so they're going to also be a 1-to-1 ratio. So it will be plus potassium acetate. Now somehow you'd need to figure out what's going on with these two. Are they soluble? Are they insoluble? So you could use the solubility rules, or you could use a solubility chart. I know that potassium acetate is going to be soluble, so it's going to be aqueous. Because alkali metals are always soluble in water, potassium's an alkali metal. Also, acetate ion is always soluble in water, so this guy doesn't even have a chance. It's definitely going to dissolve in water. Calcium sulfate, so sulfate ion, usually insoluble, except if it's with something, one of the alkali metals or ammonium. So this guy is going to be solid. So the reaction will happen. Now, I'd like to balance this. Since I have 2 acetates on this side and 2 potassiums both on the reactant side, I am going to put a 2 on the potassium acetate. So that would be what we call our general equation. It's balanced, looking pretty good. Next, let's write an ionic equation. So in our ionic equation, this is aqueous, so it will have dissociated into its ions. So we have calcium 2 plus ion with 2 acetate ions plus 2 potassium ions plus a sulfate ion, and those react to form calcium sulfate solid and potassium ion, 2 potassium ions, and 2 acetate ions. And lastly, we can write something called a net ionic equation. And in a net ionic equation, we cancel anything that appears as ions on both sides of a chemical reaction. So potassium, you have 2 potassium ions on each side, so I'm going to cancel that. You have 2 acetate ions on both sides of the reaction. And so in our net ionic equation, we'll be left with calcium ion plus sulfate ion. Oh, did I write that as 2 minus earlier? It should be 2 minus. That's my bad. So calcium 2 plus, sulfate 2 minus. They react to form calcium sulfate solid. And that would be our net ionic equation.